Hey everyone, I am excited to have Luke Williams with me today. Luke is the head of customer experience at Qualtrics. Qualtrics was acquired by SAP in the fall and is a business that I consider a leader in kind of the customer experience narrative. They provide a lot of great products and also just provide a good customer experience in general. I've been using Qualtrics since I was in grad school in 2008, like a lot of students out there, and also used it quite a bit in my corporate career. So I'm excited to have Luke today with me. We've been connected forever and finally got together on this chat. So Luke, I want to give you a minute to tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of go into some questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun to do these types of things. I feel like now more than ever, people need some connection to the world. So this is just, an easy way for people to feel that on a Friday. The background on me is really straightforward, right? I don't count anything in my professional life before the age of 27. When I got out of grad school, if people ever found out what it is I used to do before grad school, I usually find a way to pay them off. So come out of grad school, this is 2006-ish, 2007, somewhere in there. I had a master's degree in research methods and statistics from one of the top schools in the UK. And I came back to the US, wanted to find a job, really wanted to, at the time, work at the UN, working for like the UNDP or something like that. But it was 2007, nobody was hiring for that type of role. So I did the next best thing. I went to work at one of the world's largest market research companies to help credit card companies make more money. So I did that for a while, rose up through the ranks over there in the financial services practice, eventually moved over to Analytics Consulting and Methods Group, took over as the head of research methods and the head of the consulting practice there. So the first 8 or 9 years of my real career at that company, Ipsos, which is a great company. Decided to go client side after that. Going from advising companies on how to do it to see if I could build a CX program from the ground up, the way that I advise, and learned so much in the first week about how customer experience works really in companies. There's simply no substitute. Doesn't matter how smart you are, how many repetitions you get on projects. So that was a really rewarding experience to work at a Fortune 160 company. To build a client listening and customer and client care practice there. And then came over to Qualtrics. Like you, I've been a user of Qualtrics long before I got there. Probably I've used it about 10 or 11 years now. Started using it in 2010. And then first was approached by Qualtrics based on some things that they had heard that I was doing with the platform from analytics and predictive activity. And came over, decided to make the leap, build a house in Utah. Was probably the biggest gamble I think I've taken in my career, but totally worth it. Turns out everyone in the building is absolutely smarter than me. So whenever I get on the internet and start talking, everyone starts to cringe a little bit. But my background really, it was a transition from expertise in research methods, then into analytics, and then into strategy. And what I love is just, I love fixing problems. I like finding the hardest problems we can solve, and then working with teams to fix them. I'm a big team person. I don't like victory laps. I don't like individual awards and medals. People may hand them to me, but I'm always squirmish and weird about it. I'd much rather, focus on creating value for customers. That to me is a better epilogue to my story. But that's the quick background on me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's why we get along so well. As I kind of grew up in research and analytics at Adobe, and that's definitely a core piece of what I live off of now. What's we live in a world full of distraction. A great example was like remote work content went like nuts over the last and still going nuts for the last 2 months or a month and a half. How can a brand like Qualtrics or anyone else really cut through the noise and provide a good experience to really keep a customer loyal?
So this question, if you had asked me 5 weeks ago, would have been a lot easier to answer, a lot more straightforward. So now I'll cheap out and I'll give you both answers. The first one for me is, brands tend to compete oftentimes on two axes, right? One of which is the degree to which they can deliver frictionless experiences, and then the opposite axis is the degree to which they can deliver something that's memorable. And typically that memory is attached to something that people find valuable. I think how that's transformed over the past 50 days, and everyone's inbox has been flooded, right, with these like, hey, we care, we listen. It's like, most of that stuff doesn't really resonate, because the sectors from which those emails are coming are not considered mission critical to people's everyday lives. The sector engagement is lower. I think what we're really looking for now is for the places where we're fully engaged, that a company reconfigures itself to figure out a way to provide value, right? And redefining what we mean by value. Because when you think about, look over the changes in the past, like let's say 2 years, right? The idea that pharmaceutical companies are getting away from the idea of the number of pills that they can sell as a measure of value, and focused on patient-based outcomes, which is a completely different philosophy when you think about how they actuate it. So it's things like, coming up with like prescriptions for digital apps that help you modify your behavior. Instead of you a pill for quitting smoking, we're going to give you a behavioral modification app that was built by MDs, right? Right. That's a pretty significant change. When you look at the auto industry, value is changing. So my new finding make it easy to access is the focus on the central point of how much value can you create right now, because people are prepared to capture that value on your behalf, which I think is what makes companies meaningful from either an investment standpoint or is just part of the fabric of how we work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I like how you said outcomes, because I know like the last couple, probably 3 years at Adobe, I heard that shift a lot, where the narrative was like, what are the outcomes we're trying to hope for? It's not like we want to grow, visits to the site by 10% or signups by 20%. It's like, what are the outcomes that we hope to achieve from that? And I think that's definitely been a key narrative shift over the last few years.
Yeah. We see the same thing in the experience management world. Take customer experience, for example, where you would traditionally measure transactional experiences. Post hoc, you've already left, 1 or 2 question survey, how did we do? I think the future, maybe 7 years out now, maybe possibly less, of moving towards systems with like bioinformatics and kinematic systems that just says, hey, we've detected standing in a place we wouldn't expect them to for too long. Ping goes to the text message right to the guy's pocket and says, problem in aisle 7, just go. We're more focused on fixing the experience than just measuring it for the sake of measurement. Jared Smith is very fond of like that idea of like, hey, you can measure things all the way into the ground, right? You're probably better off doing something about it. So perfect measurement systems used to be how we would inform strategy and decision making, and now I think we've moved off of that towards a system of action, all up. And if we're creating things that don't dovetail to action, it creates a lot of value without capturing any of it. So
yeah, I agree with that. What would you say is at the kind of the core or the DNA of a really good experience?
So this is always a tough question, right? So I always start, when people ask that question, like I immediately get this image in my mind. Do you know what a Johari window is?
Yeah.
It's one of these great little, like all management consultants worth their salt have like these 20 or 30 like little tricks, right? That they charge you lots of money to have access to. But for me, that one is like the idea of what we know about ourselves and what others know about us. And for the DNA of experience, like I visually get this idea, right, of the double helix. Mm-hmm. So I focus on, like, when I think about customer experience, I think about it breaking down into 2 fundamental components. The first is experience design, right? So it's like human-centered design thinking. How do we create something that's valuable, that is intuitive, that is, meaning, like all those like emotion triggers. And then the second component is experience delivery. Like how do we operationalize the delivery mechanism for that value? And I think when we focus on customer experience today, oftentimes it's really focused on the delivery aspect of like somebody somewhere designed this process, somebody somewhere designed this product. Is it being delivered as designed, right? We have parameters for how well contact centers should run, or how digital experiences should run, or how we want to architect relationships and what portion of that should be our product or our people. So I think, you know, where we're probably going to have to focus more, because people have gotten really good at that. Those systems are now readily available. If you don't have those systems, you got to get them, right? Because they provide competitive advantage. But brands are still differentiating every day on the experience design. And whenever we think about it, it's like, oh, who's the best at customer experience in the world? Some of it is operational, but a lot of it goes back to how they design the operation as being differentiated. So like their thought leadership in a better way of approaching how to anticipate customer needs and service those needs is changing. So there's no real automated mechanism for that. Like there are, of course, like this, you know, if you went to the Stanford D school and things like that, like that's how you learn that stuff. But there's no scaled technology yet that replaces that skill. So when we think about like what is the DNA of those things, I think whatever a customer says is valuable is what we're aiming for. Whether, you know, so like I always like give the example, right, of like which of these experiences better? Viking cruises, like cruising up the Danube, like going to Budapest on this like $15,000 cruise, or the all-you-can-eat buffet on the side of I-15. Like those, they're both good experiences, but they're different in different ways.
Sure.
So for me, it's like, what is the DNA of that? It's like, well, know your customer. This is like just Drucker, right? 101 is like just know your customers so well that you create products and services that they require or that they're willing to pay a premium for. So for me, it goes back to the experience design aspect requires you to really know who the person is that you're targeting and how you would target them. The experience delivery side is about translating the value and emotion of that design into something that is receivable. And I think that they're equivalently important.
Yeah, the experience design and design thinking classes were some of my favorites that I took at Stanford like 4 or 5 years ago. Really cool to really understand that it doesn't just happen, right? Like what you said, it's something that you have to think about, and multiple people, depending on the size of your company, lots of teams are going to be involved. And it starts with kind of knowing your customer, like you said, but also getting alignment in how, Adobe was big on the customer journey, and same at Cloud App. It's like really understanding where people are and how we can serve them in different spots of where they are with different pieces of content or different experiences.
There's a guy in the world that so all the Stanford D School people that I've ever met have just been wildly energetic, super smart, like intimidatingly smart people. And they just bring such a different lens when you have design thinking as a background. And when I managed consulting teams, like I tried to force them to expand their horizon of like, how do you want to approach a problem? And it's a very different feeling. And it taps into a different side of the brain. And frankly, not everybody's good at it, but you have to have those people on your teams. You cannot it's not ops all day. Like it's just not. Yeah. Right. I mean, vending machines are the perfect operational delivery mechanism for a Snickers bar. Right. And no one can name me one vending machine company name. Like, maybe if you went to Stanford, if you went to GSB, maybe, but the majority of people, right, it's a function, and that's not attractive, right? It's not an attractive business to enter or want to invest in, because it creates very short-term value. And I think if people are thinking long-term about like, how do we create customer lifetime value in the long haul? It's like, how do we get them to come back? Like that to me is a unique challenge.
Yeah, that's such a core piece of what's going on right now. Like the first thing you do in crisis or recession time is cut acquisition costs, right? Like CFO or whoever's in charge of finances is like, hey, marketing, I know you enjoyed spending money, but we're not going to do that anymore. So, hopefully you've built some loyalty, or hopefully you've built some like foundational pillars for success, so that people are still going to come in if you're not necessarily paying for them to come in.
Yeah, that's the challenge that we have right now is like, I think one of the things that Qualtrics has really been focused on is like this idea of back to work, right? It's like, how do we go from this transitional stage where everyone's playing defense? Very few players are out there actually playing offense right now and thinking about long-term customer acquisition strategies. But there's a couple, and they're thinking about the game 5 and 6 steps ahead, which I think is how thoughtful everyone's defending right now. So I think on the other side of this, in a year and a half, we're going to look back and have some great stories about how people used customer loyalty that they had built over years as a defensible premise to allow them to extend into markets even while others were defending. Because like when you look at like regular versus considered purchase cycles in terms of consumer like behavior and psychology, most people don't think about most of the decisions that they have are repeating. Like you go to that grocery store because that's where you get your groceries. But all of a sudden, like it disrupts everything that you think about, even super sticky products like your financial products. Like everything is up for consideration right now. Everyone's listening because everyone is kind of tuned in right now. So when you think about like from the branding side of like, how do we deal with awareness and saliency and differentiation, the awareness level right now is through the roof. Interesting time.
Yeah. So, I asked this next question, and Qualtrics is actually a big customer of Cloud App. Almost the whole company is on the platform now, using video and visuals to kind of, be async communication, specifically the support team. How do you think, especially now, like the face-to-face is gone right now, the handshake is gone, how can video like Zoom or Blue Jeans or, whatever you're on, Google Meet is now free for everyone apparently. How can those synchronous tools and then tools like a Cloud App for async really help you connect with the customer when you may not be able to be in the same room as them?
So I'm a big proponent of like harvesting value off the thing you're doing and then thinking future scope all the time. I think any leader in an organization has to be focused on that. So for me, when I think about experience delivery aspect, communication is a huge part of that. And everyone's heard like, right, a picture is worth 1,000 words. If that's true, then a video is worth 1 billion. Right? Like the ability to describe a service problem in the chat window is one of the big barriers to chat-based agents, like chat-only agents. Is that it takes me longer to write this thing down. Like not everybody types 120 words per minute. It takes me longer to communicate that way, right? As opposed to just being on the phone, like showing you my problem also has an amazing amount of context, right? So when you're looking as a service agent, right, at Qualtrics, my ability to see what you're looking at, I know exactly where you are in the product, right? Like I can just like, there's all these cues that you're not communicating to me that are meaningful to me to contextualize that. The way that we measure that, right, quantitatively is speed to resolution. How fast was I able to resolve your issue? Video helps you do that because you don't have to take 10 minutes to explain to me that issue. I can see right away what it is. It's faster for me to fix it. And as a result, like it's a better experience for the customer as well. But for us, like if your average cost for handling a call is $10 and you aggregate that over X number of service calls over a 2-year period, that stuff pays for itself in like less than a month. And for me, right, when you think about like how it is that people traditionally communicate, right, video is a predominant form of communication now. It just is, right? I am curious as to why FaceTime in a contact center is not something that anybody's really done yet. Like, why can't I see the face of the person? I have the sense that you're not working on my problem when you're on hold. There's all kinds of visual cues that we get from looking and talking to people that are critical to how we interpret the words that are coming out of their mouth.
Sure.
Right. And I think when you take a look back, it's like if every form of communication is written, spoken, or shown, like single picture or moving picture, like the earliest forms of written communication were logographic. Right, hieroglyphs and all that kind of fun stuff from ancient Sumeria. But it's like it's so we've chosen to evolve it because we had to be able to communicate over longer distances, right? But the concept of distance now is fungible, right? What is distance? You're in Utah, I'm in New Jersey right now. Like we're talking instantaneously. Like why is it that we can't think faster is not better in terms of communicating, right? And the same, I think the same is going to be true for the service channels in the future, as well as from our side, experience management of like, how do we induct feedback? And the way that I describe this is like, you just have to fish where the fish are, how they want to be fished. Yep. And if the average 21-year-old won't take, won't respond to a 1-question survey, but will talk for 10 minutes on TikTok, like, okay, let's go to TikTok. Like, let's get video in that feedback channel. And I see, right? So for me, video and voice to text are the two real emerging technologies that we're going to want to rely on from a service mentality, but also because it's much more scalable, I think, in the long term, because it's a much more rich video. It's a much more rich content factor.
Yeah, I really liked your analogy of or comparison to the pictographs. I hadn't thought about it before. Before really written language, it was all done in pictures. But I think, yeah, there's a real power in. So I kind of discovered this probably 2 years ago. I was sending like a weekly update to one of my VPs at Adobe, and a VP or a C-level, and even at your size of company, is just getting blown up on email, right? Like all day. And so she's like, would basically never read it. Or, it'd be like 4 days later, and then she'd have comments. And then I started using, was using Cloud App to kind of record a video, and sent her the video, and she's like, "Oh, that was so great. I had my AirPods in already, and I was listening to music, and I just listened to what you said, and didn't even watch the video, but just listened to the audio, like walking into the office." And that was like such a great experience to have that. So it's just kind of like, yeah, finding where people want to be communicated to, and then also, man, it's so much easier to not have to I'm like emailing a designer and trying to think of how to tell them to make this button this way and move this image here and do this landing page completely different. And instead of sending them this marked up PDF or whatever that just looks like crazy, I just send them a little video, and I don't have to write all that stuff down and take the time, and they don't have to interpret what I'm saying. So it's been a really great way to communicate.
Anyone who's ever had to come up with a doc that explains a process, it's exactly the same issue, right? I had this issue 2 days ago of designing like sample verification procedures, and I made it as short as possible, and the doc was 4 pages. I was like, nobody's gonna read this. If I had just done it in a 30-second video, they would have gotten all that information immediately.
Right. Yeah. So you have your wiki, and then you also just have a nice little video at the top that people can watch if they don't want to read everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about annotation.
I love, you're leading CX at Qualtrics. I'd love to hear what's an experience you've had with a brand recently, retail, travel, local grocery store, whatever. What's a good experience you've recently had, and why was it kind of different?
So right before I jump into this answer, I should mention that I've moved over now to join the XM Institute cool. At Qualtrics. Yeah.
Awesome.
So going from being sort of like practitioner focused, to figuring out how to scale, the thought leadership that we develop is where I'm focused. But it synchronizes with the fact that I'm constantly evaluating experience, like almost to the point that my wife hates me when we go out to dinner, because I'm measuring stuff in my head.
Totally jaded. Yeah.
So I'm off. The truth is that most experiences now I'm so critical of, that when I find an experience that I really enjoy, I behave very abnormally in terms of allocating share of wallet and recommending those brands to friends and family. But when people get recommendations from me, they know it's coming from a deep emotional place. Right. So one of those, of course, Trader Joe's is high on my list. But the one I just had literally this morning is the one I'll mention. Warby Parker. So I have a 1-year-old son, His name is Duncan. He's up on this calendar right there.
Nice.
And he's great, except that he's one now, which means he's got opinions, and he enjoys smacking Papa in the face and breaking Papa's glasses. So I had a service interaction with Warby. I was like, hey, my kid is like just crushing every pair of glasses that I've got. And I am like now down to my last pair of glasses. Like, I need more glasses. And I ordered all my glasses from them. So I said, hey, can you help me out? Like, I don't have an active prescription. Can you look into this for me? Like, I can't, I'm in New Jersey. Things are hot here right now. I don't want to go out to an eye doctor.
Yeah.
So they respond within 24 hours. They're like, listen, unfortunately, there's actually nothing we can do for you for this instance, because like it's a medical issue. It requires a prescription. But right. So I was treated fairly and quickly. I understood their position. They were very courteous about it, and they were prompt. And they said, but if you want to, you can download this app and use it with your computer. And it walks you through this 15-minute process of like, how do we check your site remotely now? Right? Which like, it doesn't replace a health exam for your eyes. But for the purpose of writing a prescription, this will be reviewed by whatever an eye doctor is called. I always get the two confused between an ophthalmologist and an optometrist. But they're like, and they'll review it, and then they'll like, if there's no major issue, like they'll sign off on what your prescription was, and then we can make new glasses for you. I was like, okay, well, you created a process for me that is considerate of the fact that like, I'm not going outside no matter what. If my son breaks my last pair of glasses, I'm just going to start using PTO, right? Just take a couple weeks off. They anticipated that this was going to be an issue long in advance. They created an app, right, to do that, right? A prescription check or something like that. And they've created a very UX friendly workflow process to deal with a very highly like, you can easily anticipate this issue. One of the biggest nuisances that people get in glasses is having to go to an eye doctor to get a prescription. So they've taken the friction out of that experience and done it in a way that was designed around what works for me. This isn't like we make an appointment. This is do it whenever you want, right? And we'll let you know when it's done. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for from an experience that was designed with an understanding of what my need was versus what they were capable of providing, and working through a partner to do it. That to me was a pretty great experience, and I am looking forward to having more than one pair of eyeglasses.
That's really cool. That's part of a brainstorm, right? Someone is thinking at Warby Parker they're in a group setting, and they're thinking, okay, what are scenarios where people need glasses? And, obviously breaking them comes up as a part of that. And the outcome is we want to be able to help everyone who needs glasses, no matter, the person who's well prepared, and then the person who, has a 1-year-old who just keeps snapping them. So that's cool to, they're focused on the outcome, definitely, with that type of thing.
But this is, again, it's like, how do we measure experiences? If I had called them, was I treated with respect and courtesy? Were they knowledgeable? Blah, blah. It's like, yes, that's all good. So in terms of the agent's performance, that matched the performance I required, but it didn't solve the problem. So somebody taking a step back and saying like, you know what, maybe we need to measure differently. And I think right now brands more than ever, like they need to measure a little bit differently, because there's a lot of things going on with customers they have no visibility to. Like if I'm your bank, like I can see your paycheck coming in, but I don't know if someone in your family is under financial duress, right? There's ways for me to service you laterally that's outside of just the CSAT metric and NPS metric. Like we need to get a little bit more thoughtful about why we're measuring to begin with. And I think that's the root, fountain of inspiration for these types of long-term strategic fixes to highly anticipatable problems.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. This has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot myself, just talking from you about it. I'd love to hear, if we look into Luke's crystal ball, what is kind of the future of experience business, experience design? Where do you think we're kind of headed?
Yeah, and I'll keep this one short because this could be a whole book. I think we've gotten extraordinarily good at measuring and managing experiences. I think where experiences need to be better engineered is in the actioning process and in the innovation process of how we create products and services for customers. And I say that because I think performance management cultures, to a certain extent, restrict experience innovation because there's a belief that the metrics are emblematic of the thing that we care about. And I think that is a little bit askew. I think most of the performance management culture came as a translation from a history of manufacturing and understanding how to do Six Sigma, right? And I think we focused on that precision level forever. And you still hear it in contact centers right now, or in how products are done. It's like, well, reducing variability, making something more predictable is making it better. I was like, is it? Or is it just making it a more effective, version of the thing that you already designed? To me, I think we need to focus more primarily on action and innovation. And it 1,000% takes measurement to do that, to have telemetry in this decision-making process. But I think we need to push forward on the boundaries of delivering experiences that don't necessarily cost more, right? That just the overall quality of the experience is higher. And I think if you look back like 10 and 15 years, like demonstrably, the experiences you get today on average are way better, right? And we kind of go through this hedonic cycle, right? Where it's like, oh, this is better than it used to be, and I'm super happy about it. And then my expectations, like, they kind of fade. And now it's like, well, that's table stakes now. My Amazon one-day delivery is like table stakes now. Can you get it to me same day? It's like, well, do you honestly need this book that you're probably never going to read? Do you need it now? Like, do you need it today? Like, to me, the question is like, okay, well, let's rethink that scenario. Like, going back to the earlier example, like, what is value in these circumstances? And I think these systems of action, which are born off of systems of measurement and management, will foster eventually what the systems of innovation will be. From a scalability standpoint in the tech world, right? That's what we're worried about. But I don't think that future is that far away. Like, I think it's probably less than 5 years out.
Yeah, I agree. I think you made some really good points there. Luke, you're a legend. I appreciate your time. Glad we could finally make it happen.
Didn't spill anything on myself.
Stay well, stay safe,
all right,
and get back to Utah soon.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Okay.